All right, should we get started? All right, welcome everybody. Can we start with the roll call?
Mayor Bagley?
Here.
Council members Christensen? Here. Finley? Here. Martin? Here. Peck? Rodriguez? Here. Martin? Here. Waters? Here. Martin is here twice. Mayor, you have a quorum. Yes, sorry. It's on our list
Marsha
twice.
Martin is here twice. All right, let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and say the pledge. Double credit, yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get going, I would like to declare an emergency here in the city, and I am anointing myself king. Isn't that what was happening at 7 o'clock? Is that what we're all tuning in for? Oh, wait, wrong meeting. Wrong meeting.
Well, then I announce a coup.
All right. So quick reminder to the public. Today is a regular session, so we're going to go ahead and remind you that we're going to have first call public invited to be heard. If your name is on the list, go ahead and sign up outside. And if you're not on the list by the time we start public invited to be heard, you will be given an opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting, but not at the beginning of the meeting. You've got 3 minutes, and then after 3 minutes, unfortunately, no matter how much I like you and want to hear the glorious things that you are saying, I will ask you to please take a seat after 3 minutes so we can have everybody get equal time and be heard. So with that, do we have a motion for the approval of minutes of December 11th, 2018?
So moved.
All right, let's vote. Yeah, we had a bunch of moves, so we're counting that. All right, that's unanimous. Do I have an approval or do I have a motion for the approval of minutes for December 18th, 2018?
So moved.
All right, that's a lot of motions in seconds. Let's go ahead and vote. You can always vote, but let the record reflect that Bonnie Finley's not voting because she wasn't here. But that said, and Councilmember Peck was not here as well. But that passes unanimously with Councilmember Finley and Councilmember Peck abstaining. All right. Do we have any? Oh, it looks like we have a note here. What does Ordinance 2018-60 corrected to Ordinance 2019-05? Just a numerical correction?
Just a numerical correction of the ordinance number.
Okay.
None of the content or title changed.
All right. So is the 2018, where would that be?
It's the last item on second reading.
Got it. Last item on the consent agenda or second reading?
Second reading item. It's the local licensing authority.
Got it. Okay. So just for those of you following along at home that are really paying attention to details, Ordinance 2018-60 in the packet has now been corrected to Ordinance 2019-05, which actually reflects today's date. If I am reading this correctly after 7 years of sitting at this dais. All right. Do we have any agenda revisions or submission of documents, et cetera? Councilmember Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. In light of an email that I received earlier today, coupled with concerns I've gotten from a number of constituents, I would like to direct staff to review and possibly bring back revisions to our municipal code concerning traffic bicycle laws, be it crossings of intersections, such as dismounting at every intersection and crossing, just to be consistent with other municipalities as well as state law.
All right, so you're saying, just to be clear, you're asking staff to bring back a proposed ordinance saying that you have to get off your bike and walk it across every other? All right.
Yes.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
So just to bring back a review of our current municipal code, as well as if it's consistent with other municipalities' codes and state law concerning bicycles in traffic, if that makes sense.
Sure. And so right now you can't ride a bike through an intersection in town?
Correct. Not legally.
I've never heard that before. Dr. Waters.
First of all, I'm going to second.
Okay.
All right. What I want to reiterate in seconding is that we have in the schedule, as I recall, of agenda items, our ordinance on bicycle paths. And we touched briefly on it several months ago, and then in that document it got lined out, and then I know we've had some conversation about replacing that in the schedule. Because we did talk about some concerns about bike paths and obstruction of bike paths and some related issues. And I wondered at the time whether or not that was an ordinance concern or some other kind of concern just about code enforcement. And it was suggested to me from one of the assistant city managers that there probably are some ordinance changes that we need to consider. And I think we all probably got the correspondence that Councilmember Rodriguez received. And I think there are a number of issues in that are the same as we touched on some months ago. And I think then some others that need to be considered. So I think this is a reiteration of the importance of getting that on the schedule. So I second it.
Mayor Pro Tem?
This is also, I mean, I think this is a very important thing. We've been talking about bike safety and intersection safety, particularly with school kids. So this is a good time to cover many things. But the other thing is that the state law changed last year, allowing municipalities to regulate certain things, just as municipalities are allowed to regulate marijuana independent of the state law, or they can make it different. So this is a way to modernize that that ordinance and have a community discussion about it.
Dr. Waters?
Are we going to vote on? I was going to weigh in behind this action on this motion.
Right.
So I'll defer until then.
All right. So I guess repeating the motion, it's to make sure to ask the city attorney's office to bring back a review of our bicycle ordinance to make sure that it's in alignment with state law. Is that it? Okay. It's been I guess I'm going to chime in because nobody's here. So would this is the intention to make it again so that we walk our bikes across rather than ride? I just want to be okay, meaning that if I'm riding from north to south, I can keep riding my bike. All right, okay, as long as that's the case, and I'm not in my little biker cleats. I don't want to see Dennis Coombs waddling through intersections. All right, the guy needs to ride his bike. All right, let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, Dr. Waters?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. There are 4 items. I want to move that we give staff direction on 2 topics, and then I have questions about 2. So the first is this, and it's we've only briefly touched on this, but I want to make certain we get it on the calendar. I'd like to direct staff to bring an item to this council for consideration to make the street tax permanent, which would be a decision that, if made by this council, would go on the ballot in November. So thank you. The timing on this would leave to staff, but I think we've had several times it's come up. Correct. As a way to fund 6 serious projects. It wouldn't cost any increase in anybody's taxes, but it would allow us to do things with the tax that we can't currently do.
That was a motion?
It was, and it was seconded.
Okay, all right, I was waiting for a second. I guess nobody's in queue, so I'm going to ask a question. I seem to recall the last time we voted on that, we extended it, right? Meaning we voted, it was every 5 years, and then we extended it to 10 years. Is that
correct?
Right? When's it up again?
8 years, I believe.
Okay, and so I guess my only concern, I think I'd be for that. I guess I seem to recall Dale giving a presentation on the question of will it pass, will it not pass. I guess I'm curious, I don't remember why we went from 5 to 10 and why we didn't go to 20 or forever.
So as I remember that conversation, we had been historically at 5 years, and we wanted to see if it would pass if we went to 10 years. And we went through the last budget process, and that's when the conversation shifted to look at a more permanent taxes. And we looked at the ability to bond and some of the projects that we needed to undertake. Because the term was limited to 10 years, it didn't give you a lot of options in terms of how you bonded projects. And so it was at that point when council talked about wanting to look at extending it in perpetuity so that we would have the ability to take care of some of the critical needs with our infrastructure. And one of the conversations on that was also the quiet zones and those pieces where we would have more capacity within that fund. So that was the genesis of that conversation.
Okay. And Dr. Waters, is the motion to bring back for discussion, or
Yes.
is the motion to put it on the ballot?
No, the motion is to bring it back for discussion.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Let's go ahead and vote. That passes unanimously.
Can I keep going?
You sure can. You're on a roll. We haven't been here for a couple weeks, so let's
The second-
let's clear the.
The second is I'd like to give staff direction to bring back to the council for consideration a ballot measure that we would consider a ballot measure to place on the 2019 ballot to change the city charter to allow for rental periods of longer than 20 years.
You mean
General.
you're talking about leasing? So you're talking about leasing city property longer than 20 years?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Nobody's in queue. Councilmember Finley, you may ask why. So Councilmember Finley asks why.
There have been a number of conversations recently that I've been in, all about development opportunities, each of which would require some kind of public-private partnership. And for those who, on the private side of this, who might be interested in engaging and might be willing to invest their capital in constructing facilities, resources of value to the city, through which, or as a result of which there would be some lease agreement, the developers with whom I've spoken have been only as interested as we could extend lease periods beyond 20 years, because amortizing over 20 years typically is not enough to make the numbers work on a public-private partnership kind of investment.
So if you wanted to do a restaurant at the airport, or you wanted to do a restaurant at the golf course,
Or U Creek, yeah.
or U Creek, yeah, I kind of figured that was it.
No, this is
So,
not that,
yeah.
but that
no,
could
no,
be.
no, I know, yeah. So, all right. There's nobody else in the queue. We've had it. It's been moved and seconded. Let's go ahead and vote. It's just to bring it back. All right, that passes unanimously.
Two questions then.
Of course, yes.
Question, the third item, the first question. I know the staff is working on a form of reviewing proposed development projects and evaluating or scoring them. That would be a reflection of our serious commitment to triple bottom lines, right, for development,
Correct.
people, planet, and profit. Do we have any idea when that might? I know it's a complex issue. Do we have any idea when it might come back in front of us?
We want to start the conversation on the 22nd of this month. Joni and I have talked
Awesome.
about that, and Clarion will be here to talk about what they've done in other communities to bring that information.
Great, I appreciate that. My last question is this. I enjoyed the article on the front page about the Main Street Corridor plan. I'm just curious, is that plan ever going to come back to the council for review?
That is planned to come back on the 29th with council, and we want to do a reset and sort of start some of those pieces and get council's input on the goals and connect it to the council's
Awesome. Thank
vision
you.
and
That's-
statement. So those are both on there.
That's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
All right. Seeing that no one else has anything, let's move on to first call. Actually, no, we have a proclamation. And this time we're going to have a proclamation designating the week of January 14th to January 21st, 2019 as All Cultures One Voice Week in Longmont, Colorado. And we'd ask Glenda Robinson and Madeline Woodley, both co-chairs of the Longmont Dr. King Committee, who are present to accept the proclamation. Just I thought I don't see Madeline though. Oh, there she is. Sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading this as they walk down. This is a proclamation designating January 14th to 21st, 2019 as All Cultures One Voice Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas January 21st, 2019 marks the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, on which we honor Dr. King's unwavering fight for the absence of oppression and the presence of opportunity for all, and for his numerous sacrifices to sow the seeds for a movement of peace, equality, and justice. And whereas across the nation, in the state, and in the city of Longmont, honoring Dr. King has become a day of service to our communities. Events held in Longmont begin on January 15th and are made possible by many dedicated volunteers from diverse backgrounds coming together to carry forward the legacy and significance of the civil rights movement and the need to take action. And whereas this will be a week of celebration, tribute, education, service, and solidarity, an opportunity for the community to come together to commemorate the life, work, and legacy of Dr. King, and to promote a caring and inclusive community that is proud to embrace, respect, and celebrate all cultures and all people as one voice. And whereas Mrs. Glenda Robinson and Mrs. Madeline Woodley are also commended and recognized for their passion and commitment in sharing the importance of the civil rights movement, Dr. King's legacy, and for keeping the dream alive for future generations in Longmont. Now, therefore, I, Brian J. Bagley, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the week of January 14th through 21st, 2019 as All Cultures, One Voice Week, honoring Dr. King through community involvement in Longmont, and I hereby invite all to attend one or all of the events honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Signed, me. And so, do you have some things to say before we steal you for pictures?
So actually, we'd like...
Can you turn that mic on so we can all hear? Pretty please? Thank you.
Actually, we are honoring Mr. Eric Finnestad, who's the principal at Silver Creek High School this year, as the recipient of the proclamation. So
very
he has
cool.
a few things.
Great.
Well, I'm honored to receive this proclamation on behalf of our Martin Luther King Jr. Planning Committee and on behalf of the many people who every day live the vision of Dr. King within our community of Longmont. And I would certainly be remiss without also sharing thanks with the two driving forces behind this event. And I would like to thank both Madeline Woodley and Glenda Robinson for their unyielding support, their stewardship and celebration of Dr. King and his hopes for a better world for all. And certainly an inspiration to me, the many within our community and our country. I'd also like to thank Adriana Perea for her support of these endeavors and as a driving force in making our event a success. Please let me also thank our council here and our mayor for being purveyors of a unified community whereby we can all celebrate all of our cultures and feel as though we all do belong in Longmont. On behalf of our committee, I'd like to humbly invite you to our celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at Silver Creek High School on January 21st at 10 a.m. Our event will feature an incredible keynote speech, a wonderful collaboration of the Boulder County Unified Choirs, not to be missed, cultural dances, and an inspiring message which we can take forward into the year ahead, that we are all unified. And while we represent many cultures, we sing and we speak of inclusiveness in unison. Again, thank you very much for your leadership on this council and within our city, and for this proclamation honoring Dr. King and the great work of the individuals here before me.
Thank you. Glenda, Madeline, anything else to say? All right, let's take a picture. Come on, council.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Got it. Thank you.
Guest of honor, Bonnie. It's respect. All right. We have a very, very special moment tonight. We have one person signed up for public invited to be heard. So the pressure is kind of on. Mr. Strider Benston. First public invited to be heard of the year. Don't screw up. Oh, wait. Can someone please check the news and see if we still have freedom of speech and freedom to assemble? No? No? All right. We'll keep going. We're just going to assume we're good.
That is really serious, and I was going to acknowledge to, is this on? The person who calls himself president probably just finished speaking, and we don't know here whether we still have a country or not, but I'd like to quote from one of the founders of our country, Tom Paine, who actually gave Thomas Jefferson most of the phraseology that he used 6 months later in the Declaration of Independence. But this is from The American Crisis, #1, December of 1776. Tom Paine writes, from a suffering people who, having no object in view but the good of all, have asked their own all upon a seemingly doubtful event. Yet it is folly to argue against determined hardness. Eloquence may strike the ear, and the language of sorrow draw forth the tear of compassion, but nothing can reach the heart that is steeled with prejudice. The heart that is steeled with prejudice is trying to shape our laws in a dictatorial manner right now, tonight, and we'll see what happens. In honor of our democracy, our country, our planet, our ecology, our environment, our oceans, our waters, our climate, we have to take back the mantles of government from what was apparently put in power by foreign hostile power in the last 2 years. And maybe I shouldn't say any more on that, but I am giving Martin Luther King's sermon on Sunday the 20th at Longmont United Church Christ on 9th and Francis. And my topic is building the beloved community in a time of crisis. The civil rights movement was from the beginning connected with the concept of the beloved community, coming from Koinonia, Collective Farm in Georgia, Ella Baker, Bayard Rustin, Martin Luther King, and those who put their lives on the line that we might have a democratic country. And it is really in question, teetering on the balance, whether we can keep it. Ben Franklin was asked at one point, what kind of a country do you have? And he said, a republic, if we can keep it. Thank you.
Strider. Good start to the year. All right, that will conclude our first call, public invited to be heard. If anybody missed out, stick around for the end of the meeting and you can share. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, it was for, but the thing, this here, this is the, there's a list. It's for the, you're going to get your time on second reading, because I assume you're here, Susan, to talk about some prairie dogs, right? All right. If you want to go now, you can talk. No? Okay. All right. So that you will get your chance. Okay. All right. So now let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Order. No. Let's move on to the consent agenda.
Mayor, on consent agenda, ordinance, item 8A is ordinance 2019-06, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for January 22nd, 2019. Item 8B is ordinance 2019-07, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to lease the real properties known as the Keister property, the Smith property, and the Mountain Shores property, the premises, to Jim Wild, tenant. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for January 22nd, 2019. Item 8C is ordinance 2019-08, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to lease the real property known as the Bogot property, the premises, to Gary Bogot, tenant. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for January 22nd, 2019. Item 8D is ordinance 2019-09, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the Modern West annexation, generally located east of Airport Road and north of Nelson Road, and zoning the property MUE, mixed-use employment. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for January 22nd, 2019. Item 8E is ordinance 2019-10, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a portion of right-of-way on Deer Pond Court within the Harvest Junction Village subdivision, generally located north of Quail Road, south of Western Sky Circle, and west of Martin Street. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for January 22nd, 2019. Item 8F is ordinance 2019-11, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of waterline easement generally located within Lot 9 of Diagonal Industrial Center, City of Longmont, Boulder County, Colorado. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for January 22nd, 2019. Item 8G is our Resolution 2019-01, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the town of Berthoud, the city and county of Broomfield, the town of Erie, the city of Fort Lupton, the city of Fort Morgan, the town of Hudson, Little Thompson Water District, Central Weld County Water District, the city of Louisville, Morgan County Quality Water District, Platte River Power Authority, Superior Metropolitan Water District, Tri-State Generation and Transmission Incorporated, Left Hand Water District, the city of Boulder, Longs Peak Water District, and the Southern Water Supply Project Water Activity Enterprise for reimbursement for the Southern Water Supply Project Carter Lake Outlet Works modification. Item 8H is Resolution 2019-02, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Colorado Department of Transportation for grant funding for design and construction of Hover Street underpasses at Dry Creek and State Highway 119. Item 8I is Resolution 2019-03, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city, Boulder County, Weibel Enterprises LLC, and Roger L. Weibel for an amended and restated conservation easement in gross for the Yoakum property. Item 8J is Resolution 2019-04, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the Fourth Amendment to the Fifth Interim Intergovernmental Agreement between the city and the municipal sub-district of the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District for participation in the Windy Gap Firming Project. Item 8K is Resolution 2019-05, a resolution of the Longmont City Council regarding the importance of the year 2020 United States Census. Item 8L is Approve 4 Capital Improvement Program projects, and 8M is Approve application for 2019 Peace Officer Mental Health Grant.
All right, do we have a Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I would like to pull item 8J, Resolution 4.
Okay. Councilmember Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I'd like to pull item 8K, Resolution 2019-05.
All right, do we have a motion? Councilmember Finley?
I'd like to move the consent agenda minus J and K.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. All right, let's go on to ordinances on second reading and public hearings on any matter. 9A is ordinance 2019-01, a bill for an ordinance amending Title VII of the Longmont Municipal Code on prairie dog control. Is there a presentation by staff? Are we good? Okay.
We have no presentation. We can answer questions by council.
All right. Seeing no questions from council, I'd like to open the public hearing on ordinance 2019-01. Let's go ahead and start. Well, Ruby Bowman, if you could come down and say your name and your address, and then take 3 minutes, that'd be great.
Mayor Bagley, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, and City Council members, Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive. I don't have much more to say about the ordinance this evening. I've written to you about prairie dogs and what I would like to see in the draft ordinance, and I've already spoken about this at this podium. But what I would like to say is thank you for supporting stronger protections for city prairie dogs. Moving forward, I hope I can see the same strong commitment from city council members for prairie dogs on public lands and wildlife in general. As you know, Natural Resources is updating our wildlife management plan. We are so blessed in Longmont to live where we live. We have river, stream corridors, reservoirs, and lakes, and beautiful open space properties for wildlife. When residents were asked to share their favorite aspects of living in Longmont, respondents of the 2018 Customer Satisfaction Survey ranked the natural environment third on a list of 15 categories, beating out neighborhoods, downtown Longmont, and recreational opportunities. The quality of life in general was at the top of the list. Nonetheless, one could infer that we have a high quality of life as a result of our natural environment, and prairie dogs are part of the natural environment. The prairie dog ordinance has been a long time coming. And I remember in the olden times in the late 90s, a young Longmont woman consistently attended city council meetings urging council to protect prairie dogs. Later, another Longmont resident rallied supporters and at one time a developer to attend council meetings in support of prairie dogs. And my good friend Stephen Weber was a staunch supporter of prairie dogs. He attended city meetings and contacted staff and the mayor about prairie dogs. And there has always been some level of support for effective prairie dog protection in our community. When the Land Development Code was updated in 2001 with the good faith effort provision, it was an improvement over having no protection laws whatsoever, but still it was not quite good enough. I hope the draft ordinance gets the job done, but we will have to wait and see if it does. Moving forward, the biggest challenge will be to find viable release sites for relocation. I appreciate staff's hard work to protect our wildlife and for their work on this ordinance, and thank you, Mayor Bagley and council members for your commitment on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Chris Boardman?
Good evening. Chris Boardman. I'm at 1512 Left Hand Drive, and I'll be quick. I just wanted to add that I support stronger protections for prairie dogs in the city of Longmont. Whatever we can do to protect prairie dogs and other wildlife, I back it 100%. I think this is not a waste of time and should have been done long ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Celine DeYaris.
Good evening. Happy New Year. I'm Celine DeYaris. My address is 1005 3rd Avenue. And I want to thank council for working to update the city code to provide more due process for managing native wildlife, in particular our humble prairie dog. There are a couple of items in the code that I would like to specify as requesting adjustment. There is a mention of donating prairie dogs to wildlife rehabilitation without specifying that specific to black-footed ferrets. I would prefer that the language be more clarified than just wildlife rehabilitation, because that still allows for raptor programs. And there is also what I perceive as a loophole in how there is a distinction between land under development and land not currently in development when seeking a permit to exterminate prairie dogs. I think that can be abused, and I would like to suggest that there be language that would essentially say if a permit is pulled on land not currently in development, that land would not be able to seek a development permit for at least 12 months after an extermination happened. Otherwise, I hope that we will move forward with stronger protection of prairie dogs. They deserve it. They are a native neighbor in our community. And again, thank you for making this effort.
Thank you. Susan Summers.
Hi, Susan Summers, 1418 Galilee Lane. And now I'm not ready. I was ready 5 minutes ago. No. So I have to catch up on what I was going to say to you. Well, first off, I want to thank everyone for all of your work on this municipal code. I know that all of you have spent a lot of time hearing from us and talking to us and responding to our emails. And a big shout out to the staff. I know they have worked really hard on this as well, and I'm extremely appreciative. So a couple of things in reference to the language in the current version. Selene just mentioned this. I would like to see, I think the new language has kind of created another loophole where someone that's not in development could apply for a major permit, exterminate the prairie dogs within at the end of 90 days versus allowing us a longer period of time to try to find a relocation site, and then they could come back and apply to develop, within a week or 2 weeks after having received that extermination permit. So I would like to see some kind of language in there saying that they can't develop for a period of time, preferably like a year after having received that permit, just to avoid entering into some big loophole, which is what brought us all here in the first place. So I would suggest that. And then I would also like to see some kind of a language. The staff I know was putting together qualifications for relocators, which I thought everything looked great. I think it would be nice if we had language in there to qualify that the relocation has to actually relocate 95% of the prairie dogs on the site. As we know, we had a recent incident where an unqualified relocator only moved 2 of 30 prairie dogs. And so I think that it would be logical to require, 3. 3. So I think it would be nice to have language in there to qualify that aspect of a relocation as well. So that was all I had to say, and thanks very much.
Thanks. And I have no idea if it was 3. It was 4? Okay. I'm just excited to be back with everybody. Hard to contain it. All right, Jeremy Gregory.
On that note, Jeremy Gregory, 238 Sweet Valley Court, Longmont, Colorado. We're almost there, but as you're seeing, just a few more critical pieces remain that will create, I think, a great ordinance. And I'd just like to touch on a couple of those. The draft, one of them is that the draft currently reads, the receiving site shall provide an estimate of all reasonable costs of transportation. Our recommendation would be to replace the word transportation with relocation. Why? Well, because the word transportation is vague. It should be clearly stated that all estimates are related to prairie dog relocation. Second, not to be redundant, but to adhere to humane treatment of this keystone species, it's imperative to have prairie dog donation programs be solely for the black-footed ferret program. I think we've heard, quite a bit on why that is the case. We don't need a raptor program. Raptors have a lot of other species, and it's just broken logic to kill a prairie dog colony to feed to injured raptors when they're released. You've just taken away their food source. It just makes no sense. But the black-footed ferret program, prairie dogs are their main source of food. So this is the last opportunity to put into place an ordinance that is sound, equitable, and will without doubt be used by other municipalities as a model for their own ordinances. With these last few suggestions implemented, you will have created and passed something to be proud of. We hope council and staff take these recommendations under strong consideration, as we believe they will strengthen the code, creating an ordinance that does not unfairly inhibit any one party. Our recommendations ensure social responsibility is adhered to as well. Furthermore, our recommendations eliminate undue burdens to the city, developers, and wildlife advocates. I really hope you have all read the report by Steve Jones of the Boulder County Audubon Society and renowned ecologist that supports the need for an ordinance with the recommendations we have listed above that support the health, safety, general welfare, and environment as established in the city's charter, vision statement, wildlife management, and other binding documents. So thanks again for all that you have done. I know this has been crazy and tough, and it's been a long road, but we're in just deep gratitude for what you've done. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And then finally, Kars Pustmuller.
I'm Kars Pustmuller. I live at 383 Jasper Drive in Lyons. I am an animal ecologist and an animal ethologist, and I hold a PhD in biology. I have been appointed one of the members of the City of Boulder's Prairie Dog Working Group, a group that recently provided the City of Boulder with the City Council with our final recommendations for prairie dog management after 2 years of really intensive, dedicated work. So I was interested in what the City of Longmont was doing to improve their prairie dog management. And so regarding those proposed amendments to the Longmont Municipal Code on the prairie dog control, I have a couple of comments. I support the proposal to change the title's words from prairie dog control to prairie dog management. I support the inclusion of the provision that all prairie dog relocators must commit to trapping at least 95% of the prairie dogs at the take site and relocate them to the release site before trapping is discontinued during relocation of a colony. Boulder City staff use the 95% minimum threshold to help ensure that relocations from city and private lands are successful. Relocators must continue trapping until this threshold is achieved. With adequate effort, 95% and greater can be achieved. I also believe that prairie dogs killed and donated to a facility that uses them as food to rehabilitate wildlife is only acceptable when the wildlife being rehabilitated is the nation's most endangered species, the federally endangered black-footed ferret, a mammal that depends on prairie dogs for more than 90% of its diet, and therefore for its survival. Killing prairie dogs by carbon monoxide for use as food for other wildlife species results in unnecessary and inhumane suffering for the prairie dogs, since other prey is acceptable to other wildlife species. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight, and thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. If you could leave that with our city clerk, that'd be great. All right. Are there any other, at this time, we're going to go ahead and close the, actually, is there anyone else that would like to speak at the public hearing? Come on up, sir. Luckily, I asked.
Hello. Thank you for listening to me. I'm Ronnie Purcell with Animal and Pest Control. I live in 1058 South Owens Court in Lakewood, Colorado. Unfortunately, I've not been able to be here at any of the meetings other than tonight. So pardon me for being a little bit sporadic. From what I understand through some of this process that you're going to do is you're going to impose a cost or a permit on a landowner or a developer to move forward with prairie dogs. Is that correct?
Technically, we can't respond, but just go ahead and talk,
Okay.
and we're going to be taking notes, and we'll chit-chat after.
If that is true, then that is unfair. When the organization speaks of native wildlife and so forth, there are certain rules and laws that have a boundary between what Colorado Parks and Wildlife have, which is everybody's property, and that's what Colorado Parks and Wildlife deal with. We have those rules. But when it sits on private property, that person's and the laws change a little bit. And that's where it's unfair for a city or a county to come in and say, you should do this just because an organization doesn't like what you're doing. They have their heartstrings that are being hurt. That's not fair to the developer. It's not fair to the property owner. So that should not be a cost they should have to incur? If so, the group that you're listening to is the group that should be paying those costs, because it's unfair for an outside group to come in and tell you what to do and how to do it just because they don't like it. The part of 95% being caught, that's getting a little bit on the unreasonable side. There's a cost to everything that everybody does out here, and somebody has to pay for that. Colorado CDOT, they only require 80% or 75% depending on the jobs that we work on. They do not require this 95. For a relocator in my group or their group to achieve that, that's a very high goal. And there has to be a cost value here that you have to assess. If it's your property, how much are you going to afford? There's nobody in this room that wouldn't sell a piece of property for the most money they can make and pocket the most they can make and take all the cuts they can. That goes for everybody in this room. I have not been able to look or read what you guys are putting out there, so I'm a little bit spacey here. But it's just unfair to pass super stringent laws because somebody doesn't agree with what somebody else is doing on their property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else want to speak? 3 minutes to the rebuttal.
My name's Anna Rivas, and I live at 4501 Nelson Street in Longmont. And I just wanted to say that an exterminator who doesn't even live in this community should not have such great influence on whether or not the residents who do live in here and who love the wildlife have a say in the matter of how that wildlife is treated. We aren't a group. We're just a bunch of people who live in the area, who love the wildlife, who love the area, who don't want to see it all exterminated and all wiped out. And we've come together. So in that sense, we're a group, and we're not an official organization. You know, I'm a resident here. I've been living here since 2003. And an outside exterminator who doesn't have any appreciation for the wildlife that we have and that we love should not be allowed to for his weight to carry that much influence on the decisions that you're making regarding the ordinance. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close the public invited to be heard. Councilmember Finley?
Since I was missing on December 18th, I had a couple questions that I wanted to ask about the ordinance. The first being the major prairie dog management permit, the cost of $500, and then the $1,200 per acre. Is the $1,200 per acre, does it have to be paid whether they're relocated or exterminated? It doesn't matter. Either way, they have to pay $1,200 an acre.
Dawn, you want to come up and...
Good evening, Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Finley, members of council, Don Burchett, Planning Manager. The way that the ordinance is written for a major prairie dog permit is that there would be a $500 fee for the processing of the application. That would be required no matter what somebody does with the animals. If the animals are relocated, then the area that they occupied, there would not be a fee charged, the $1,200 for the area that we're taking them out of. Or if they're relocated on the property in another location, there's also the exception that there is no fee that would be charged. It's only when they exterminate.
Let me just read this, because that's not what this says. It says at the
Could you tell us what page you're on and line number, please?
It would be page 639. Or page 9, B, habitat restoration fee. At the time of issuance of permit, an applicant for a major prairie dog management permit shall be invoiced for a fee of $1,200 per acre of active prairie dog habitat lost, prorated for any partial acres of lost habitat. The habitat will be lost when the land's developed. So I don't see where it says that it doesn't have to be paid if they're relocated.
Section C.
C.
The director shall waive the habitat restoration fee or any portion of such fee in situations where landowner establishes to the satisfaction of the director and the natural resource manager that the landowner would be entitled to destroy prairie dogs inhumanely, but instead has used only humane methods to destroy the prairie dogs targeted under this permit. The director shall also waive the habitat restoration fee or any portion of such fee where they've relocated. So it's C that does that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying that for me. That fee of $1,200 an acre, even for exterminating prairie dogs, just seems, it seems like it's too much for me. And therefore, I will not be able to vote for this ordinance. I do think, you know, in my mind, what we were going to do was allow folks who wanted to relocate prairie dogs to do so, but not to penalize the landowner for having prairie dogs on their land, and that's what this does. So I just wanted the rest of council to know that's how I'll be voting on this.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have a question on the comments from the staff on this ordinance. I understand that, I know that no mention of animal control and its exemption was included in the ordinance we approved last time at the first reading. But I know that an animal control amendment has been drafted. So my question is a motion needed to adopt that language to add that amendment in?
Correct. That was my goof when I said no presentation. That was the one piece I needed to talk about, and Eugene and I were going to talk about bringing it up. So yes, we would need a motion to include that language. I'll let Eugene work you all through that. So
okay, so he's gonna talk, and then we'll have a motion to adopt what he says. Is that
correct?
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I want to speak on a couple of things. First of all, I was under the impression that the $1,200 an acre fee would be for habitat restoration or habitat loss would be waived if the developer was going to exterminate animals and chose to use the humane method.
That is correct.
Yes, so that is, if they simply choose to use a more humane method, that is not, that fee will be waived. So it's only people who choose to use the less humane method. Mr. Strong has been writing us, and I would like to actually suggest one of his things was that people will not relocate out of state. I do think that I don't know that we need to add that. I think that would go without saying, but we could add that because, you know, we don't really need to think about relocating out of state. We should clarify, as the mayor asked for a limitation on how much developers could be charged. If we limited it to certainly not going out of state, then that would be one thing to do. Secondly, I would like to add something, just one phrase, to the maintenance of the relocation sites, which is to be done by the advocates, and I would like it simply to say in conjunction with the Department of Natural Resources. That kind of goes without saying, but it's always best to put things in the law, I think. Just for clarity. I would like to put that animal control exemption in, as we discussed. And I do think we could simply clarify the language about donations solely for black-footed ferrets. Since that is 90%, if 90% of their food is coming from prairie dogs, then that just makes sense. Thank you.
All right, and then let's go ahead and no one else is in queue. Why don't we turn the time over to you, Eugene? Do you want to just, we're going to be talking specifically, the question and issue is making an exception for our city employees who work in wildlife management. So if there's a rabid prairie dog in a window well, they can deal with it without going to jail.
Thank you, Mayor Eugene May, City Attorney. So in the council communication, we did explain the need for an exemption for law enforcement personnel, primarily so that animal control can continue to assist the community with their prairie dog issues without having to get a permit. We do have Sergeant Buckholz here to answer any questions you may have about animal control operations. The City Attorney's Office did draft some language, and if council is interested in moving forward with an exemption, I can walk you through. It would be 2 steps. One, I would recommend first to substitute the amended ordinance. It is a different ordinance than was passed on first reading. If council were to do that, that would be the baseline. Then we could add the language for the animal control exemption. I can let you hear what we have come up with. It would go in section 040 with the other exemptions. It would be the first sentence that would read, public law enforcement personnel, including animal control officers, are exempt from the provisions of this chapter for the purposes of carrying out their official duties, assisting the community with prairie dogs outside the borough and colony setting. You know, we don't want the animal control folks getting into, you know, prairie dog habitat. They deal with prairie dogs in window wells, garages, houses that may get hit by a car or other moving vehicle. And we thought the limitation to outside boroughs and colony settings would be appropriate.
So it's inappropriate just to make a motion asking that that language that you just stated be placed into the current ordinance?
I would suggest moving the amended ordinance first.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Dr. Waters.
I just want to be clear what we're voting on right now. We're voting on approval of this amendment?
No, we're just swapping out we're swapping out this amendment for what we got in our packet, and then we're going to vote on the new amendment.
We're not voting on the entire ordinance?
Correct, not yet.
Thank you.
All right. Now we can vote. Councilmember Martin? No, I was just waiting. I was telling you to hit your button. But that's all right. So that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Finley against. All right, Eugene, Mr. May, could you continue?
And to put in an animal control exemption, this would be section 7.06.040, first sentence. This is page 3 of the ordinance, line 7. And I would propose the language to be public law enforcement personnel, comma, including animal control officers, comma, are exempt from the provisions of this chapter for the purposes of carrying out their official duties, assisting the community with prairie dogs outside the borough and colony setting.
So moved. All right, let's vote. Nope, Mayor Pro Tem? No? Okay. That's okay. All right, that passes unanimously. All right. So, do we have motions? Can someone make a motion or not? Dr. Waters?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Questions relative specifically to the ideas here. I heard Mayor Pro Tem's view on the limiting to the black-footed ferret, but I didn't hear a motion. Were you moving that we amend the ordinance to limit I guess the availability, the donation, of the prairie dog to the black-footed ferret, not the forest, the ferret. Thank you. Yes, was that a motion?
Yes, I'll make that a motion.
Then I'll second it.
All right, there's no further discussion. Should we vote? Actually, before we vote, so just to be clear, the motion is to put wording in the ordinance that would replace page 8, section 4.6, or I'm sorry, page 7. Should no landowner accept the prairie dogs that are the subject of the major prairie dog management permit application, or should any prairie dogs remain on the property after an attempt to relocate the prairie dogs targeted in the permit application, the director shall issue the permit subject to all applicable fees. As an alternative to destroying the prairie dogs under the permit, the applicant may, but is not required to, donate them to a facility which uses them to rehabilitate the black-footed ferret. Councilmember Martin.
If we approve this amendment, does that mean that this ordinance has to come back for a second reading?
That's why that's why I said the specific language, so that they can go back and look at the tape and.
Okay, great. Thanks.
We're good. All right, let's vote. All right. Okay, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Martin voting against. Incidentally, I gave a report in the 6th grade on the black-footed ferret on how they went extinct. And I remember when they were found, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. So cool. So there's probably not a lot out there to feed. But hey, that's all right. That's cool. All right. Dr. Waters.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. We've heard a suggestion that we strike the word transport and replace it with the word locate.
I believe it was relocate.
Relocate,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Are there concerns in terms of any legal issues or operational concerns? It seems to me to be a simple but clear, but improving language in this. So I'm going to move that we strike transport and replace the word transport with relocate.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually restate the motion to make sure that the motion is that we replace the word transportation on page 7, line 6. So it would read the receiving site, it currently reads the receiving site shall provide an estimate of all reasonable costs of transportation. And we would change the word transportation to relocation.
Correct.
Okay, that is the motion. Let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Martin against. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. It was also mentioned that we make an amendment that 95% of the prairie dogs be trapped and relocated. Is there any thoughts on that?
Councilmember Martin.
Oh, lots of thoughts. Yes, I have some thoughts on that. We don't really count all the prairie dogs. We use a formula based on sightings and other matters. We can ask the staff to describe the process to us, but my feeling is that is too stringent a threshold, as I think was said at least once. in the comments on this bill, because the fact is that that formula could be off and you would never reach the 95% threshold even if you had trapped all of the prairie dogs that were actually living in that borough, because the estimate could have been off by too much, and so there really weren't enough prairie dogs that you could ever reach the assumed amount of the formula. So I would not be voting for this. I mean, I think, well, this isn't a motion yet, but I think that if anything, it should be revised to be a lower number than 95%.
I guess that I'm going to make a point of order, and we could talk about this particular issue, but unless there's a motion, right? Meaning if someone wants to make a motion and if it's going to be seconded, then we can discuss. Right now, all we're doing is talking about what we think about 95%. And do you want to make a motion, Councilmember Peck?
Actually, I would like David Bell or someone to, before I make a motion, to the extent that we can actually trap 95%.
Is it possible
because
to catch 95%?
Because if I make a motion, I want to make sure that I understand the ability to do
Fair
that.
enough.
Mayor Bagley, council members, David Bell, Natural Resources Manager. Again, this is one of those questions that kind of depends on a lot of different variables. You can trap 100% of prairie dogs on a site. I've seen that happen. I've seen other sites where you spend an enormous amount of time trying to trap all the prairie dogs and had very low success rate. The way that agencies have addressed that is Boulder County, I know, uses you have to trap for 2 weeks to say that you have successful trapping. Internally as staff, we use 10 days. You have to have 10 days of trapping to make sure you're trying to get a cleared site. City of Boulder is the first time I heard the 95. I know typically what they like to do is say you have to have 5 days of clear weather. So that means if on day 3 it snows, you have to start over on the 5. But if on day 4 it gets windy, you have to start over. So there's a little bit more stringent on the five clear days. So there's multiple ways to do this. 95 is a number that I'm not sure that I've seen that used in the past, but again, it sounds like the City of Boulder is using that. It's higher than what I've heard in the past.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. No, I won't be making a motion.
All right. So is there other, Mayor Protem, you're in line, but that's currently no longer a topic of conversation, but what the heck? What do you think about 95%? Is that what you're going to say? We're not going to be voting on it, it looks like.
So would private owners be subject to the 10 days that the city uses? I mean,
Mayor Bagley,
that does seem to me
Mayor Pro Tem, yeah.
like a good amount of time if people are acting in good faith.
I was just asking Don Burchett. I think part of this allows for the planning director to have internal policies on how we manage relocation. And that's something I think that we could talk about, how we, from the natural resources side and the planning side, feels appropriate. If it is 14 days, if it's 10 days that the city staff uses, that we'd require that the public do the same thing that staff is doing or look at something different. But I think those are things that we can do through the internal process. I'm kind of looking at the Cormier Herald, is that?
So generally, you know, when we talked about the inclusionary housing ordinance and we talked about rules and regulations, that's where this would come in, and it would be part of the relocation plan where we would establish those parameters in consultation with natural resources. Because as I've gone around with them and we've looked at our own property, each property has its own set of circumstances that you have to consider in terms of how that would occur and what would be the most beneficial to trap the largest number of prairie dogs that you possibly could. So it would be in that relocation plan.
And
Thank you.
For what it's worth, on December 9th, 2018, the Fort Collins, Coloradoan had an article that talked about how successful they were in moving a prairie dog colony, a pretty big one, and 52% of the females were successfully moved and 31% of the males, and that was a huge success. So as much as I would love to see 95%, I don't know if that is statistically doable. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. This was concerning comments about major prairie dog permits that are not under development application. It would be page 6 of the ordinance or page 636 of the council packet, lines 1 through 3. If the property for which a permit is sought is not the subject of a development application, acceptance must be made within 90 days of the notice. I would move that the property would not be considered for development application for 12 months from the time of granting of the permit after the 90 days.
Councilmember Martin.
I am not seconding Councilmember Rodriguez's motion, so I'm not sure what it's appropriate for me to say. I had a comment on the previous subject.
That's fine. Yeah, the motion, without a second, the motion died. So go ahead.
Okay.
Well, nobody seconded it. The way to make me wait is to go second. No one else was in the queue. Is there a second? Second. All right, it has been seconded. Councilmember Martin.
Okay.
All right, does someone want to speak on the motion?
Yeah, no, I have, so 2 things to say. First, I wanted to add support to this idea of leaving the regulation, the threshold of what represents a good faith effort up to the staff. And the reason for that is because the state of the art and best practices in animal wildlife management changes over time, and it's been my observation in quizzing them about various practices that they pretty much stay up to date. So we allow it to be a moving target, and I hope we will not have a motion to attach an arbitrary threshold to that thing. Second is we made a promise to the development community in support of the idea that we are going to build more units of affordable housing to make it affordable for people, make it more affordable to develop properties within Longmont. And I think that it's frankly entirely unreasonable to put a 12-month moratorium on someone with horse property, for example, because they can't sell they can't sell or redevelop their property because they exterminated some prairie dogs. In fact, if you've got a 5-acre horse property and it's then you've got a very good reason for exterminating prairie dogs if they should show up on that property. And then a member of your family might get sick and you really need to sell to a developer, and where are you then? I mean, come on. 90 days is plenty of time for the prairie dog superhero rescuers to swoop in and find a relocation site for those prairie dogs, and I certainly would not support that amendment.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Councilman Rodriguez, can you explain what your reasoning for that amendment is?
Yeah, I believe that it was brought up earlier in the public invited to be heard on the second reading for this, that it could still be utilized as a loophole where you could apply as you're not in development application process, get your 90 days, get your permit granted, exterminate prairie dogs, and then immediately apply for development application. And so that could be considered a possibility of loophole. And that was the I guess, impetus behind the motion, and the concept that if you do have a 5-acre horse property, you're likely not going to sell it for development in this concept, or at least the way the spirit of the ordinance has been set up. And that's why the amendment was put in, is to make sure that the spirit is upheld through also the language. So the technicality is also, I guess you could say, observed in this concept. Because I don't believe that the majority of agricultural uses that would apply for a major permit to exterminate prairie dogs would want their property necessarily redeveloped within a 12-month period of time. Yes, I guess extenuating circumstances could provide that hardship, as mentioned by Councilmember Martin, where, say, a member of the ownership of the property passes or becomes ill or something and needs to sell the property, and then the subsequent owner would want to develop at their purview. But I think, again, with the length of time it takes to get through the development process, a 12-month issue is not going to be a big hindrance to such a property, and that's why I think the spirit or the concept of the motion is not unreasonable.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I do think that the 12 months is, that would be onerous to a landowner should they have a change of heart on whether they want to develop. So I won't be voting for it, and quite frankly, pretty much anybody who starts the development process knows it's going to be more than a year, so you tack on another year, now you're up to 2 or 3 years, which I think we're already there, but adding another year onto that process will not help us get any kind of housing. So I will not be voting for this. Also, you know, by the simple fact of going through this process and doing this ordinance, pretty much any landowner close to the city has already exterminated or relocated all their prairie dogs. So I don't see it as a big, I don't see it as a necessary amendment.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. My objection to this amendment is actually simpler, although in the same direction as Councilmember Finley's. To me, if we put in something like that, we're assuming nefarious intent on the part of the residents of Longmont. And in fact, I think that our ordinance, stop. I am disturbed by people making faces at me from the gallery. I think that we should assume the best of intentions on the part of our residents and not put things in our ordinances that deliberately impede people from doing what they need to do. I felt the same way and didn't get a chance to say it about putting restrictions on how you could donate the corpses of prairie dogs, which seems to me to be, you know, it just seems to me to be an unnecessary Baroque fillip on the ordinance, because if they're dead, what difference does it make? But at any rate, I don't support the idea of putting some kind of a moratorium after on use of property after the extermination of prairie dogs. Let's assume that our people are good people, and let's assume that most of the things done in the city are done for good purpose.
Dr. Waters?
It matters if you're a black-footed ferret and you're hungry. That's not what I was going to comment on, but I'm just thinking if I was a ferret, I might care about that. As much as I'd like to support Councilmember Rodriguez's motion, I'm not going to support it either. I think I have an obligation to explain why rather than just cast a vote no. But it's not about it's not about anybody's motivations, nefarious or otherwise. Anything in my mind that gets in the way. We just work so hard to pass a housing package, which includes an inclusionary housing zoning ordinance. Anything that obstructs the implementation of that ordinance seems to me to be a bad idea. And I support what we've done with this ordinance, but this part of it, we're talking about trying to find the worst case and make law based on our fears about worst case. And you know, one of those like voices in the back of your head from long ago, somebody saying to me, the worst case makes bad law. Do not let that drive what good policy looks like. And so with that thought in mind, I'm not going to support the ordinance, not because I don't believe that's well motivated and there's probably a loophole. And if it's a big enough loophole, we'll fix it later. But at the risk of obstructing what we're trying to get done with our housing package, I'm not going to support this provision.
Councilmember Martin?
I just have one last question for Mr. Bell or whoever would like to answer it from the staff. How many active prairie dog colonies of greater than 25 animals do you believe we have here in the city on private property, not on public land?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Martin, I'm going to let Dan Wolford, who's really out on the ground with the prairie dogs. We really know on our on the city-owned properties what we have, and we manage it very well. But out on private property is probably more of the realm what Dan's seeing on the ground.
Mayor, council members, Dan Wolford. The number of colonies that we have throughout the city that we are managing are roughly approximately 25 colonies.
But what about private land? Just private
These are
land.
all on,
Are they?
we don't manage any private land. These are all colonies that are on city-owned property.
But do we know how many on how many colonies are there on private land? Do we know that answer?
We do not have that information. But on city lands, again, we are managing approximately, 25 colonies, of which some of them we're just managing the periphery.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just as a spitball on the answer, do you think there are more on private land or on public land?
I'm trying to think.
The answer is you don't know.
Well, we don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good
we
answer.
really don't know.
Good answer. Nobody else is in the queue. I guess I'm just going to chime in. First meeting that we had as this new council, absent the esteemed Councilmember Waters. This was put or requested by staff to put on the agenda. So it's been a year and 2 or 3 months of getting here. When this particular section, going back to the 90 days versus development request versus no development request, was originally 30. And I was the one who posed the question of, do we really want to give people only 30 days? Because people are then going to rush out, kill all the prairie dogs, and then apply for a permit. And then we went to 90 days. What I like about this, and both, I know the Strongs and I know the prairie dog protectors. And it reminds me of a family in a divorce proceeding. And you're the kid and you're looking at both sides. And you're like, man, they sure do hate each other. But, on a personal level, I've gotten to know everybody. And I think that when they're separate, they all good people with different ways of viewing the world. But the reason I like this, I am not going to support what? Oh, the ordinance. But I will be not supporting the current motion or the current amendment only because I think that the ordinance as presented with the amendments that we've made is really a good middle ground. It's a good example of being pragmatic and people with different ideologies coming together to figure out, well, how can we do this so that we put politics and ideology aside and figure out a solution? The developers can still develop. They can, 90 days, if you decide to kill your prairie dogs, you give notice to the protectors. Hopefully, knowing them, they're on it. They'll know if there's a relocation site available. They'll get going. They've got 3 months. If the developer wants, there's no longer an impetus to kill your prairie dogs, meaning that the protectors have to go out and do all the work. They're going to relocate. They're going to get the permit. And I'm going to develop my site just like always. And then 30 days before breaking ground, if the protectors have not been able to relocate, even if it was a year, year and a half, 90 days, well, I can proceed. So there really isn't a motivation for people to just go out and kill the prairie dogs. And even if there are, 90 days, deadlines stimulate progress. That means that people need to be aware of potential relocation sites. We decided to get rid of the list, but nevertheless, so it's not that I want to kill the prairie dogs or encourage people to get around it with loopholes. I just think the way the ordinance is written and with the amendments we've made, prairie dogs are protected, developers can develop, and landowners can still have freedom of alienability with their property, and I think we've created good law. I really do. and so I won't be supporting it. But there's nobody else in the queue, and so we have a motion that's been seconded, and I believe there's no other debate, so let's go ahead and vote. All right, that the motion fails with Councilmember Rodriguez and Mayor Pro Tem for, but 5 of us against, so the motion fails. All right, do we have a motion for the ordinance? No, we just the Mayor Pro Tem?
I move that we,
Ordinance 2019-01?
yes, I move that we pass that.
2019-01.
2019-01.
I'll second that. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Just in the grand tradition of saying why you're going to vote the way you vote, I want to say that, first of all, I think we've spent way too much time on this at the expense of issues that ought to be properly greater concerns of the city, mostly on humanitarian matters. And that doesn't affect how I vote, but it affects how much debate I'm willing to engage in. So I hope that however this vote comes out, that we stop, because we have homeless people dying in the streets, and they count more to me than individual prairie dogs. I would be voting a different way if prairie dogs were an endangered species, or if they were a keystone species in the habitat urban. I would be voting that way differently in either of those cases. But prairie dogs are a keystone species in the Pawnee grasslands where they are thriving. So I will be voting no, and ultimately the reason for my decision is that, having researched the matter as much as can be researched, I believe that the ordinance is inhumane, that prairie dog relocations are inhumane to the prairie dogs as well as to the property owners who are saddled with them. So I'll be voting no.
All right, and with that, let us vote. That passes 5-2 with Councilmember Finley and Councilmember Martin against. So, and thus endeth the chapter on the great black-tailed prairie dog. So, all right, let's move on to 9B, an adoption of International Fire Code, International Building Code, International Residential Code, International Existing Building Code, International Plumbing Code, International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, International Energy Conservation Code, International Property Maintenance Code, and the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. B1 is Ordinance 2019-04, a bill for an ordinance repealing and reenacting Chapter 16.32 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting by reference the 2018 edition of the International Fire Code. Do I have a motion? All right, I will second. Oh yeah, we do. Would anyone like to speak on this issue? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Mayor Finley, that sounds cool. Councilmember Finley.
No, thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have a question. Do you want to answer it, Sean? Or Harold? My question is, are we now going to be requiring sprinkling of townhomes?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Finley, Joni Marsh, Planning and Development Services Director. Yes, you are correct. That is in the amended fire code ordinance before you, and Captain Michelle Goldman, our fire marshal, is here if you have some specific questions regarding.
What will that cost?
But that's not actually true. It's not. I mean, yes, it is true, yes, but it's not true. Yep. They don't have to. They can get out of it by giving enough room between the houses for the fire trucks to get in there. So sprinkling townhomes, or around back or in front. They don't have to do it as long as they allow access to the building for the trucks. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I would like our expert to answer my question.
I am the expert in
No,
all
you're
things,
not.
Bonnie.
Yep, you're on. You're on.
Mayor Bagley, Council, Captain Michelle Goldman, Fire Marshal for the City of Longmont. So to answer your question and to make a slight correction, the piece of code that you're referencing is actually in the residential code.
Mhm.
And it has been in there since 2009, and at direction of council, it has been excluded. Actually, it's been postponed, is the way the term in the ordinance is, postponed adoption of that piece of the residential code. I think it's R313.
Don't care about the number.
Okay, so it is a requirement, and so that piece has been postponed. However, what it is it's straight code, but we've included all the exceptions, and there's some takeaways, there's some things to include greater density, which is what some development has. We can look at fire hydrant spacing, so there's trade-offs. So it's a place to start a conversation with development, is what it is.
So if I wanted to build townhomes and wanted to build, say, a group of 12, 4 and 3 buildings, would I have to sprinkle each one?
So the way the code is written, so in the fire code and the building code, those are correct. But if the residential code kind of stands by itself, and Blas, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong, because that's kind of your area of expertise.
A yes or no would be good.
So let me kind of jump in here. So there are options that you can choose that would not require you to
that would
offset the requirement
that type
of sprinkler
fire protection.
And so when you look at it, one of the things that's driving it is the density that you put in place and the inability
for fire trucks,
and fire access and proximity to fire hydrants.
Did you have any builders come in and talk about how that would hinder their ability to build townhomes?
Not that would hinder that. So, Councilwoman Finley, not that would hinder it. They did have questions, and we had, I think, 6 contractor meetings, and then we actually added a 7th stakeholder meeting, plus met with our master board and had 2 open meetings. So nobody stated that it was a deterrent. I mean, I think it makes them reevaluate options. The IRC is set up so that it deals with single family and duplexes mostly, so it's kind of a standalone.
And we are postponing that, right? We are postponing sprinkling single-family homes and duplexes.
Yes. Correct. So that
we're now, the change will be that we're going to require it of townhomes.
The straight piece of code
which is normally more affordable.
Correct. Now, if you wanted to add the access for fire trucks to have the adequate access to go on each side of the structure, or you wanted to put fire hydrants in other locations, then you can choose to take those options and not sprinkler them. Okay. So it's a series of choices that individuals have.
All right.
So like the city manager was saying, so we have turnarounds that create havoc. We have 26 foot for aerial versus a 20. So we're looking at the density factor for developers. So what do they want to do with their land? Is it give us access? Because quite frankly, it's difficult in some places. So we want to, the problem we're really trying is when you look at townhouses is proximity to the fire and the ability to respond to that fire.
Have we had any townhomes that have caught fire in the city in the last 10 years?
So this past year in 2018, I believe we had 7 fires that included multifamily residential. I'm not sure at this point if they were townhouses specifically, but in the metro area, there have been 7 incidences of townhouses and or condos that have caught fire.
But we've always required condos and apartments to be sprinkled, haven't we?
So multifamily, yes. And traditionally, those are built out of the fire code and IBC, so there's a little bit of different protection piece there.
Michelle, a different question for the council. So if you choose to do some of the 2-hour construction on your townhomes, that also makes a difference in the evaluation?
That's correct.
So depending on the construction, similar to commercial, if you do the 2-hour firewall ratings through the attic, those are other options that come into play that you as a builder can choose that then will address that component.
Yeah, I think.
Council, so there are options. It's a starting place. It's a place to start. So how are you going to protect and solve our problem as well? This is not retroactive on any old townhouses that have already been built.
What about ones that are being built right now?
Okay, so that has been a point of a discussion with staff. We are not being retroactive on any of those. So if they have site, much like your inclusive inclusionary housing and affordable housing bills, if they've approved site
So,
plans and plats.
As long
then-
as they're approved before today, they're good.
If they're in the system today.
Yeah, if they're in the system and have been approved, so
Yeah,
approved site plans. If they
yeah.
haven't submitted anything and been approved, then that would, of course,
Yeah, that's the only problem I have with any of this, because I know that you do this for a reason, and I understand that the reason is safety, which is, of course, the most important thing. But it still bothers me a little.
All right, seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote. We are voting, there was a motion and a second on the passage of ordinance 2018-04. That passes unanimously. All right. Ordinance 2019-02, a bill for an ordinance repealing and reenacting chapters 16.04, 16.06, 16.12, 16.14, 16.16, 16.20, 16.22, 16.28, and 16.40 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting by reference the 2018 edition of the International Building, Residential, Mechanical, Fuel, Gas, Plumbing, Property Maintenance, Energy Conservation, Swimming Pool, and Spa, and existing building codes. Do I have a motion? Anyone want to come and I would like to open up the public hearing. Anyone want to talk on this matter? Seeing no one, can I have a motion? So I would move, okay, thank you, Councilmember Peck. I will second that. All right, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Moving on to C, ordinance 2019-03, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to lease the real property known as the Carnegie Library Building located at 457 4th Avenue, Longmont, Colorado, the premises to Longmont Trable Cust, Inc., the tenant. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. How long is this lease? Just, it's 1 year?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. At this time, we'd like to open it up for public comment. All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and close the public hearing. Do we have a motion? All right, Councilmember Finley is moved, and we have a second for Councilmember Rodriguez. Seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote. All right, and that passes unanimously. Finally, D, ordinance 2019-05, a bill for an ordinance amending Title II, Chapter 2.68, Sections 010, 060, 090, 100, 110, and 120 of the Longmont Municipal Code regarding the local licensing authority. And again, this used to be ordinance 2018-60. Are there any questions from council? Dr. Waters?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I asked this question before the meeting, and maybe you could clarify. I'm just clear, or I need to be clear. I'd like clarification on exactly what role the city has, what role the council may or may not have when it comes to approval of liquor licenses. Who makes that? Who authorizes? And does the council have anything to say or do with that decision or process?
Mayor and council, in Longmont, there is a local licensing authority. That is the municipal judge, and City Clerk Quintana serves as a secretary to the licensing authority. So council does not have a role in that. Council could have a role in changing the structure if it wanted to.
If I had a concern about a liquor license, I would express that to Don, to the clerk, as a citizen, basically. Not as a
Correct. You could
council
make
member.
complaints. There is state investigations. There are local investigations also.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Can we have a motion? We have a motion, right? I thought did you? Anyway, can I have a re-motion just to be? All right, second. Let's go ahead and vote. I think we did. Did we not? Anyone want? I'll give you one more chance because I remember I looked at Jared up there and I'm like, you want to come say something? And I didn't say that. So anyway, would you like to, Jared? All right, let's go ahead and vote. And that passes unanimously. All right, going back to items that were removed from the consent agenda, Councilman Martin, let's go ahead and start with, actually, let's start with K, Resolution 2019-05. That was Mayor Pro Tem. So let's go ahead and do that one because it should be. No, I'm sorry, Councilman Rodriguez. rare opportunity to see the banner flown from Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I pulled this because I recognize in the communication it talked about the kind of tumultuous political environment that we're in, especially considering I believe there's still currently pending litigation concerning the citizenship question. Either way, it did ask in the communication for any council member that's interested in being part of the committee to speak, and I would actually like to throw my hat in to be involved with the committee. So that's the only reason I pulled it. Thank you.
Thank you for the hat. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I was going to pull it too because of the same thing. I would like to be involved because it's very important to this community. It's how we get our funding. It's also how we get representation. Colorado is possibly going to get another representative, but we have to get everybody to actually participate. And this has been going on since the founding of this country, so we can't let this important way of understanding the demographics and the citizens of the country, or the residents of the country, be ruined. So I'd be happy to participate too.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. I also am very strongly in support of this resolution. I also want to say, just to reiterate, just in case anybody listening, watching, whatever you're doing, might be in doubt, that from the beginning, the language in the census required a count of all the people that are here. It never said citizens. It never said anything about the legality of documents. You have to be a person and you have to be here. And I just want everybody to know that. I am also willing to participate if having 3 council members makes a problem where you have to post everything that it meets, then I withdraw. But if I am needed, I am willing to serve.
All right. As always, I'm inspired by my fellow colleagues' willingness to step up. I'm going to move Resolution 2019-05 since nobody else is in the queue. That's been moved and now seconded by Councilmember Finley. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Councilmember Martin, let's turn to Resolution 2019-04, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the 4th Amendment to the 5th Interim Intergovernmental Agreement between the city and the municipal subdistrict of the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District for participation in the Windy Gap Firming Project.
Thank you. I am not going to oppose this resolution, but I thought it was a good time to update the public on some things about the Windy Gap Firming Project. You can get from reading the packet, if you did that the estimated cost of this particular progress payment is 10% higher than it was at the beginning of the year. And so the engineering costs and the money costs of this project both continue to increase. Today at the Windy Gap participants meeting, there was an engineering report and a number of engineering specification changes were reported on that will cause further increases in the cost of the project. So there is that side of it, which is, you know, it's not happy, but we are still, I want everybody to understand, in the range where we have the ability to pay for this project with the bonding authority that we have and funds that we have. So, you know, there's no reason to panic about that at this time. The other thing I would like to update people on is that we are very close to having, the state of Colorado is very close to having to act on the subject of the Colorado River Compact. And that means that according to Colorado law, the Windy Gap Diversion Project is in fact the junior most water right in Colorado, and that means that that water goes away as soon as we have to start um, curtailing water rights in Colorado in order to honor the compact, which is the senior-most water right that Colorado recognizes, to give water to Arizona and the states south and west. So what I'm here to talk about is just that there's an increasing risk associated with this project. We need to be vigilant, make sure that we don't need to reduce our obligations or even consider a more drastic action. But the time is not yet. So I'm going to support this. I just want to make sure that it doesn't become a habit. We need to be watchful in our oversight of this project.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I move adoption of this project.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. We are voting on Resolution 2019-04. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. We doing okay, guys? We're almost, I think we're in the home stretch. We doing all right? Or do you want a 5-minute break? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. All right, let's jump back into it. I'm eating Munchies, peanut butter cheese crackers, and I didn't realize how dry they are.
They are. Would you like some water?
I'm going to have to reach into the roof and peel it off the top of my mouth on Channel 8 and get ready for some good anti-Mayor Bagley propaganda coming up. All right, let's move on to the 2019 retreat discussion. Before we begin, I would like to say that the Bagley Law Firm had our holiday party at Casa Bonita. It was fantastic. So I'm just throwing that out there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm right, Council? Thank you. It was very sweet. All right.
All right, Mayor
Sandy?
Bagley, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I'm here to talk with you about your 2019 retreat. You did establish a temporary kind of a placeholder in your calendar of Friday, February 1st and Saturday, February 2nd. And although you can change the venue to Casa Bonita if you would choose, currently we have the Museum and Cultural Center reserved for the event. Okay. And so at this point, we would like to create a draft agenda. This is coming up rather quickly, and so we are interested in what it is that you would like to discuss, how you would like to integrate last year's work and the existing work plan into whatever you do in your retreat, if that's what you would like to do. If there's a desire for team building, dinner on Friday night, and any other hopes, dreams, et cetera, that you have for the 2019 council retreat, because we would like for it to meet all of your needs. So starting off with, what are those?
Polly?
I think we did have a very good work plan from last year. I think it would be really useful to discuss ways we can deepen and broaden those initiatives. And I would like that to be the basis of our retreat discussion, because we're just, we've had some very heavy lifting this year, and it would be a waste to start all over again. And I think that we have made a very good start on a lot of those things.
We could also go see Aquaman. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I agree 100% with Mayor Pro Tem Christensen. There is one thing I would like to add, not a new thing to the agenda really, but we do have some foundational imperatives to the city, usually facetiously characterized as keeping the lights on, but in this particular case, I think it's literally keeping the lights on. And in particular, this year in the world news, we've received a couple of very serious scientific findings that essentially say that acting on climate change and working hard on the transition away from fossil fuels is imperative for all of us, and that coincidentally 2030 is kind of a pivotal date in that transition. At the very beginning of this council's time in office, Mayor Bagley introduced a resolution a proclamation asking us to resolve to move to 100% renewable electric generation by 2030, and the council subsequently formalized that as a resolution. What we are learning as PRPA, who has as our generation authority, has also now, with the other 3 cities in PRPA's service area, also adopted a similar or the same resolution, but all with the target year of 2030. But what we've learned is that we as cities need to be contributors to that by using local self-generation more, by experimenting with municipal battery storage that can be used for various reasons, and for incentivizing people to lower their own carbon footprint. And most critical of all, having the LPC utility engage in demand management. And really, in order to enable the city of Longmont, or in order to enable PRPA to get to, in their resource plans, a true 100% non-carbon by 2030, we need to understand how much we can contribute in terms of demand management, load shifting, matching supply to demand when you have an oversupply during the day instead of an undersupply during the day, which will happen. That all falls on the city to get it right. And so even though it's not a new council aspiration, it's just keeping the lights on, I think that we should have at least some discussion of how we're going to contribute to that as a council, and get the city on the right track for those objectives. So that's something that I hope I moved. Are we doing motions or are we just doing discussions here?
I mean, yeah, right now, just the suggestions. I mean, technically, a motion at this point in the meeting is appropriate, but I think it would be more likely to pass after we've heard everybody's ideas.
Okay, well then I'll wait.
Dr. Waters?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. So I'm just thinking about what I just heard from Councilmember Martin. Doing a couple things. The idea of foundational work, or what's our core work, much of it that's carrying over from 2018. And I think maybe we get a chance to talk some of this even on this Friday. But I think we ought to be clear, if there's a foundation upon which we're building, what's in that foundation, because there is a bunch that's carrying over before we start adding additional things. And what the implications, what I was contemplating is that the 100% renewable by 2030 was in the core. But what you were just talking about started to seem like bigger than that. So anyway, that's what I was just reflecting on. Personally, I want to echo what I've already heard about being clear on the core, and then what we build on that, how we refine, whether it's a work plan or project plans. I really would value coming out of it knowing the priorities we've set. Kind of what is Councilmember Finley thinking about with the project she's working on with the foundation and the 529 plans? You know, where is Councilmember Martin thinking about in terms of the Performing Arts Center and a convention center, and Councilmember Peck on transportation with Mayor Pro Tem? You get my point, right? Where are we? What is the plan? So I would know what you need from me in terms of support, so we don't collide. More importantly, that we don't miss opportunities, that we fold into the work as it matures. We fold in those aspects that need to be, or braided together, right? So almost everything that I think I'm going to be involved with in some kind of leadership role, I know fully that I've got to stay in close connection with Councilmember Martin, Councilmember Finley, Councilmember Peck, with the mayor and the Mayor Pro Tem on the early childhood initiatives, because they all come together, right? Along with that, at one time, when we were talking about work plans, I think the mayor suggested that we ought to be equally as clear on what we stopped doing, right? Or we're not going to push hard. So I think that ought to be part of the conversation. And I said then, every time I've been in that conversation about organized abandonment, the only thing we ever abandon is the conversation, right? You can never agree on what to stop. But I still think it's worth the exercise, so that if it translates into a discipline for us in 2019, I think that would be a good thing. And finally, with respect to team building, everybody's had their different experiences with team building, and some good, some bad. I will say this: I have found myself several times recently in conversations with colleagues, with council colleagues, and with city staff, in discussions about how to understand the variability in what we all bring to our work as council members or as staff members. And in every one of those conversations, at some point it's come up, because it's so much a part of my experience, is the work of the Gallup Corporation and their StrengthsFinder approach. And if there's a team, just from my 2 cents worth, if there's a team building, if there's an approach to team building that would be useful, not just for the council, but for every member of the senior staff, if we got our heads just a little bit into that research. Don Clifton was an author with Marcus Buckingham. They had a trilogy of books. It's a powerful set of findings on what do people bring to their work that they do best, and how do we build on what their strengths are, rather than always trying to fix their weaknesses, which makes us never better than mediocre. But also understands this, gives us a way to talk to one another about what you need from one another, right? What do I need? What does the city manager need from him? And what do I need from him? The more he knows about what I bring, the better he's going to be at responding to what I'm trying to get accomplished, or we're trying to get accomplished together. And I don't know what the costs are. At one point in time, we worked with the Gallup Corporation to bring some of that work into my organization, but. I just think it wouldn't be a bad time for us to take a look at that. So when I'm talking with you, Sandy, I have a pretty good idea what your strengths are. And if I know those, I'm going to be more effective in either articulating what point I'm trying to make, or get the best out of you in something we're trying to get together, and vice versa.
I like the idea of something that would force us to come up with a stop doing list. And if we can do a trust fall with Harold and Eugene, that's all I want. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would suggest we do a dunk tank with the mayor. That would
Hey,
be a
let's do
team
it.
building exercise.
Let's do it.
I think it's useful to have some team building exercise. I don't want it to be very time consuming, because I have done this so many times, and but it does. This is mostly a new council, and I do think we're still learning about each other's strengths, and I do think it would be useful to have something like that. I also think it would be good for us to have some kind of presentation about communications, and how to integrate our communications a little better, and how to get our communications out to the city as a whole, because a lot of the initiatives that we're doing, like early childhood learning, like climate change, like coordinating research, the idea of building turning this into a research center, as well as the whole ladder of opportunity, from Councilwoman Peck and Waters' intern initiative, and the things that they do at Front Range Community College and the Center for Career Development, so that the town understands that there really are opportunities for them to go on learning, and from high school on to have a range of opportunities for jobs, from people who don't want to go to college all the way up to people who want to do really sophisticated research. That's really not getting out to the community very well. And if we could talk about communications and how we could be more effective at communicating with churches, with parent groups, with teachers, with the school system, with the higher education. Anyway, that's something I was thinking would be really helpful this year.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. My kind of suggestion, it would have to revolve around this newer council, as of November of 2017, instituted a few changes, like the Friday morning work sessions, adding the second public forum. And I think it'd be appropriate just to commit a little time to evaluate how we've used them, how we might be able to improve them. Also, I would like to include in that coffee with council. I really enjoy coffee with council, but I think there could be some maybe changes that might improve that as well, as far as maybe different timing to include some other people that might not normally make it on a Saturday morning. So maybe just a few minutes to have a council discussion on how we think they're going and improvements going forward on that.
So like new and current processes to kind of, debrief and do an autopsy to see how we might stop doing some, make them better, or even enhance. I think that's a great idea. Not that the other ideas have been bad, but that in particular I enjoyed. Thank you.
Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I think all these are great ideas. I particularly like the finding out strengths and weaknesses. The test that we took, was it 6 years ago? That was very good, and I found very helpful as to how to approach people and how to communicate with my fellow council members. There was also a book that Katie Witt gave us when she was here, and you went online and took the test, and then if you did it as a group, it actually tells you how to talk to people and how best to get the most out of everybody's strengths, which might be helpful as well. So I like that idea, and I really like the idea of doing an autopsy on some of our processes that perhaps we could enhance or get rid of. I think that's a great idea.
Councilmember Martin?
I think all these are good ideas. If I were standing at Sandy's podium, I would be having a little bit of trouble trying to figure out how to organize these things because they're coming from every direction. Would it be a good idea to either go from left to right or from topic to topic and have each council member say what they think should be done on each one, or something like that, where we can know what we're talking about?
Well, I think that we could again, but I think that that's what we're kind of doing.
Okay.
And the only thing I kind of like everything I've heard so far, and so what I would, going back full circle, what I'd maybe like to see on your suggestion is every time we talk about that, I always think, well, what could we do? And so maybe what I would like, I mean, we always you've mentioned demand-based or demand-side management. I know that right now that Platte River and Longmont have it's an experiment where Platte River actually turns down our transformers, and so a couple times a month your iron might take a little longer to heat up, your refrigerator might get a little warmer. I mean, just they've been tweaking it to see what happens. My question is, what could we do? And maybe having a presentation by LPC for a couple minutes that might allow us to understand what we might do as a council to start thinking about things we can implement as a city. So I'd rather have the date, because I have no idea locally what LPC could do, and it'd be interesting to know what we could do.
Yeah, well, I would like to elaborate on that. Councilmember Waters mentioned that it sounded like I had a large list, and I don't. What I really have is two lists.
Two large lists?
No, two items. Two items on the list.
Sorry,
the city needs to find and better communicate, because I know we have a lot of really hard to find programs about residents reducing their carbon footprints and the city helping residents reduce their carbon footprints. I think a lot of people don't take advantage of them because they don't know about them. So thing one is, let's work on helping residents reduce their carbon footprints. And thing two is, let's begin the process, the urgent process, of learning how to do demand management in an all renewable grid. And those are, I think, all the words that you need. I will be sticking my nose into what LPC is thinking about that between now and the retreat, frankly, if I can't be stopped anyway. And the thing that needs to be understood by everybody, so what you were describing is actually called conservation voltage reduction.
Well, yeah, that's basically what I said, Marcia.
And sorry, I'm just yanking your train, Mr. Mayor.
That's all right.
But it's a pretty lame example of it, frankly. And the city needs to get to be much smarter about that. And it is a problem that turns upside down as soon as we get to 51% renewable generation of electricity. And It is. And so we need to be learning not about how to do it today when our generation is primarily by means of coal, but we need to do it, we need to know how to do it starting in 2025, or actually starting in 2023, when PRPA is going to pass the 50% mark. And it's critical that we do it, and I can't say enough about it, but I will stop short of saying enough about it because everybody else has things to say.
We better have them before 2025. Yeah, so Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Okay, to Marcia's something, to her conversation, something that we can do immediately is address why, if you are opting to get your energy from wind power through the LPC, are we paying more for that? And can we, if we're going to incentivize residents, they can't really be paying more for wind power than they are through. So I'd like to address that as part of that conversation. I like all the topics of conversation. I'm particularly interested in the integration of our existing work plan, and I want to come out of that with timelines so that when we decide to do something or move forward on it, we have a timeline. I really am interested in the dinner on Friday night.
Yeah.
I knew that would get a response from Mayor Bagley.
I like you, Joan.
But all of the other suggestions I agree with. But my question to you, Sandy, is are we making sense to you?
Okay. Do you want to read back what you've got? And
do.
let's see where we're at. And if somebody doesn't want something, speak up.
So the next step in this is for me to draft an agenda for you to review. But essentially what I heard is that you'd like to maybe start off with StrengthsFinder or some sort of a team building that helps you to communicate better with each other because you'll know more about each other's strengths. And then really dive into the work plan, particularly deepening, broadening the work plan, asking questions about what everybody is doing, trying to make sure that there is a plan to weave everybody's individual work together and add timelines to that. In addition, ensuring that we also then talk about what we're going to stop, how we're going to evaluate what we're doing. Those may be the wrong order because it may be evaluation first and then what are we going to stop based on your evaluation. And then some discussion around communications. How do we further our communications plan around these things and continue to do excellent community involvement in that first tier of community involvement, which is the informed level?
Just jumping in real quick. The original motion was to challenge staff to come with a list of stop doing.
Right.
So 3 weeks, you have a deadline. So I'm going to come with a list, but I would anticipate staff would also have a list. So anyway, just heads up. Keep going. Sorry.
And then dinner Friday night?
Well,
Dinner Friday night. I would like to clarify, do you want for that to be family dinner or just council dinner? What's your preference?
I like family.
Family dinner?
Yeah.
Dinner
In
out?
private life, if my family's not invited, I say, well, I'm not going.
Yeah.
But
Okay. So family dinner. And I'm assuming that if there's time, we could do things like a dunk tank, watch Aquaman, or do a trust fall with Harold and Eugene. I'll see if I can weave it in. But those were the main things that I heard. In addition,
I would prefer Aquaman.
to the, in addition to the energy, the climate piece. Sorry,
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
The last piece.
All the female council would love Aquaman. I'm pretty sure. Paintball, even
Paintball.
better.
There you go. Paintball.
That would be awesome.
I do have one other quick question for y'all. One
Let's
thing
do
that
it.
we had kind of gone back and forth about, the city prepares all of our accomplishments as well as our work plans for the next year. We present that to you in a paper format, but we've also done it in a trivia game. We've done it in a video. We've done other things. Do y'all have a preference, or would you like to just keep it in a paper?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want trivia because the trivia directors and city staff want everything because we're not there. We set policy. We don't know the details. So that was great for you for a half hour, but since it's the city council retreat, I mean maybe a very brief 10-minute PowerPoint presentation with some pretty music that we can watch and go, oh, that makes us feel good, you know?
Okay. Some photos of the last year. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm sorry, Councilmember Finley.
I just wanted to know when you anticipate our retreat to end, because I was asked to speak that Saturday afternoon at 2:00, And I didn't know whether to say I would be in a retreat or our retreat would be over and I could accept that invitation.
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Finley, it is up to you what time you end your retreat. I
We
will
were-
ensure that all the pieces and parts match.
We're talking about Friday, right?
I think you're talking Saturday.
No, but what I mean is, but we're talking about Friday.
Friday and
some
Saturday.
Saturday. Have we, last time we just did one day, right? I kind of like the one day thing.
Not totally sure I can pull all that off in one day, so maybe Saturday morning end at noon, no later than noon.
Considering we're at martial law, I get what I want. One day. No, I'm not. I'm kidding. It was just a 8-minute, yeah. No, I'm kidding.
I mean,
You're
it's
not at martial law.
It's completely up
Okay.
to the council. It's really how much time you want. This is your retreat
I'd
for
like to
your
see it
discussion.
one day.
So if you'd
I'd
rather
like-
have it one day, then
I'd
we'll make
prefer
sure
not
that
to
that
go on
happens.
Saturday. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Martin? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think, you know, last time we planned for 2 days and got done in one. I would like to plan for a day and a half in case we need it, but let Councilmember Finley accept her invitation. Okay. A thing I would really like added to the agenda is a level set by the council members who are spearheading each of the work plan
That would be the
items.
focus, right? That'll be the main focus. That'll be the
main
bulk of the
focus.
time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's, discussion should be the bulk of the time, but each discussion on a major work plan item should begin with a level set from a council member who is most involved or the two council members who are most involved.
And is the council interested in also knowing the staff updates on what's happened in those arenas
Yes.
as well? Okay.
And then, by the way, before I forget, Karen, could you and Christina please get me the list of organizations? And you said we could get numbers for how many preschool kids. If I could have that well before the retreat, I'd look really smart. Thanks. But since everyone now knows you're really doing the work. Anyway, Dr. Waters?
I just wanted to second Councilmember Martin's suggestion that we plan for a day and a half, and if we don't need it all, or if we don't need all of a half a day, it gives Councilmember Finley a chance to do what she needs to do that afternoon. But that's a heck of a list if we were to do it right. And I appreciate. I don't have the pressures on me that you have on you as a father and as a businessman. I get it. So I don't want to be unsympathetic to that
No, it's all
schedule.
good. No, it's all
but
good.
But I think if we need 2 or 3 more hours to wrap it up, I'd hate to miss that opportunity.
No, hey, I'll be there. I assume that there will be breakfast on Saturday,
But of course.
correct? So, all right, let's move on. So you've got the direction that you need, right?
I do have the
Then
direction that I
Then
need.
let's
Thank
move
you
on to
very much.
legislative update.
Okay. So that's also me, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. The legislative update is really short because the session just started on Friday. There has already been 129 bills that have dropped as of today. We've been cycling those as quickly as possible to try to bring them back to the City Council. I am still waiting on staff on a couple of different things, but topics you will likely see next week include a couple of bills around early care and education, as well as energy, recycling, and sales tax. So those are the ones that I'm seeing so far that have hit the gate that I'm trying to prepare for next week. Those will be posted on Monday. It will be a one-page brief. I'll also email it out to you also that you have it on Monday for your Tuesday meeting. It will be publicly posted in our posting place right out here.
Councilmember Martin.
I didn't know there were so many, so this may be an unreasonable expectation, but I really would like to know what our local brewers and distillers think about the spirits licensing, because it could potentially be important to Longmont.
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Martin, I appreciate that. That's what's taking a little longer on that one. That one does go to committee next week, but rather than bring it for your position, I wanted to ensure that it really was going to help people. Our local licensing authority has no opinion on it. Yeah.
Councilmember Christensen.
Sandy, I don't know if you have this yet, but I would really appreciate, it's important to, when I read those bills, to know who the sponsors are, what they represent, and what their political party is, because it helps me get an idea of the intention behind the bill and what area, what part of Colorado they're from. Do you have a list of that? I know
So-
this is all new people, or a lot of new people.
So Mayor Bagley, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, I think that it's listed on the bill which party. I mean, the sponsors are definitely listed on the bill. Let
The
me take a
sponsor,
look.
but not where they are
Not-
from and not their
the
political
Okay,
party.
let me look and see if there's a way to be able to easily add that.
There
The other
might
thing
be
is
a-
that the tracking list is also online. It's updated every 2 or 3 days, but that I don't think gives that information either. So let me see if I can at
Okay.
least find you a cross-reference.
Yeah, okay.
All right, I guess, Councilmember Martin.
Oh, it'd be great if you can actually add that to your letters, but in the meantime, because I agree that that's important knowledge in judging a bill that's being introduced, but the way I did it is the sponsors, in fact, are listed in the front matter, and if you go over to the side and say Colorado Legislature and the last name of the sponsor, the first hit is going to be the district and the party affiliation of that person.
In the meantime, I'll go ahead and get a
No,
list.
no, I'm saying if you on your browser, you have 2 panes open. In the first one is the link that Sandy's tool goes to, and that gives you the text of the bill where the names of all the sponsors are right up there at the top.
Yes,
Yeah. No, they don't, and that's why you need another panel where you Google, and if you say Colorado Legislature name, then you will your first hit on Google will be their page, and right at the top it'll say their party affiliation and what district they're from.
And Mayor, one other quick reminder, the legislative
Yeah.
dinner is January 16th at the museum at 6:30 p.m. So
All right.
I'll see you
And I guess I just want to chime in that one of the things, I mean, I joked that, well, I want to go see Aquaman. I wasn't serious, but that's my passion. I love to go watch movies with my kids, but I think that talking state politics, is also a passion for some of our council members. And again, I guess I personally wouldn't want to, I mean, if there's something that's important, I'll keep reiterating that I don't think it's a good use of our time to talk a whole lot about state issues. I would rather spend our time talking about what are we going to do here locally in Longmont, because it would be easier, I mean, it would be very easy to spend 10, 15, 30 minutes of council time when we cannot, I mean, we all have good relationships with Jonathan and Mike, and who's the new one that was elected? Sonia. And so we can reach out and have those one-on-ones, but and we can vote to say, hey, we think that you should vote this way, but I just don't think it's the best use of our time. So the good news is we can debate that at the retreat, right? All right. Okay, so that said, anything else, Sandy?
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to mayor and council comments. I'm sorry, no, Scott, final, you want to say anything? You're the only member of the public that I see. All right, Erin, you want to say something? No, she's like, no. she's good. All right, now let's move on to mayor and council comments. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I just want to let the public know, if there's anybody still watching, that the Longmont Youth Council is are starting to hand out their grants to child-initiated projects, and they give up to $500 for grants. The project has to be initiated by a child, and it has to be something that will help or be able to be presented to the community. So this is usually a huge deal, and they give out 4 or 5 grants every year. And flyers are going to be put out in the community all over at the rec centers, at the schools, et cetera. So be looking for those. They're very, very interesting, very exciting, great way to get your kids involved with the Longmont Youth Council. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
I would like to urge everyone to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. They could go to the Monday, the 16th, 10 to 12 at the Silver Creek. They could go to the
What
Denver.
day? What day?
The 16th?
Wednesday?
Monday?
16th, I think,
Yeah.
is a Wednesday,
Oh, it's a Wednesday?
isn't it?
Wait a minute, all right.
Let's just double check. I just want to make sure you're handing out the right.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it's the 21st.
21st.
From 10 to 12.
At Silver Creek, right?
At Silver Creek. There's also the Parade down in Denver. Or you could do what Martin Luther King would do, which is to serve the community in some other way. A lot of people, I think, feel like this is a, it's a guy who was very important and then he died. And it's not just about celebrating one human being. It's about celebrating the thousands and millions of people in this country who have fought with strength and courage and extraordinary sacrifice and leadership to make the American promise for freedom and dignity for everyone come closer to reality. And it's an ongoing struggle, and we need to celebrate the fact that we have moved a little bit further along, and we need to understand that there's still a long way to go.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I would like to remind the mayor that this Saturday afternoon, we are going to the Gray Havens philosophy meeting.
God, I love you.
Why?
Because you
would
reminded
have
me.
Forgotten, right?
What time we going?
I think it's 1 to 2, but it might be 2 to 3.
So
2 to
this
4.
is this.
Yes, it's at the
noon.
Firehouse
Actually,
Arts
no,
Center.
It's at 1:30. Gray Havens Philosophy at the Firehouse Arts Center. It's on there.
Yeah.
I'll be
Okay.
there. Thank you, but still, thank you.
Right, and I just, while we're on the subject, they're a great group and they're expanding their offerings, and I am just completely in love with them as an organization that enriches the quality of life in this city.
Councilmember Finley.
I just want to remind the public that next week is our public forum. So everybody should come and tell us what they think.
And that, I've got no further comments other than I'm excited to be here for another year with you guys. It'll be a good year. All right. Harold, anything?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Mr. May?
No comments, Mayor.
Oh, and before I adjourn, we postponed the review for you two. When are we looking at doing that now?
22nd.
22nd.
January 22nd.
Okay, perfect. And with that, let's go home. Hey, other council members.